and this is another thing I talked to you about. As we were talking about this subject the other day, and I brought up this quote from Musashi.
Yeah.
And the quote is, "If you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything."
Yeah.
And to me, that is what has, I guess, recalibrated reading for me, is that when you start seeing all these connections and everything, and part of it, quite frankly, comes from the fact that I wrote a book that is about this subject. And once you go that deep in it, it's like, okay, now I start seeing it everywhere. And I mean, even it kind of all started, it definitely all started with About Face for me.
Yeah.
With About Face for me, when I was in Iraq, and I knew About Face was a great book. This is on my second book. On my first deployment, my book was With the Old Breed, as a matter of fact. That was my book.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, but it was so disconnected. It was such a stretch. I mean, my first deployment to Iraq was absolutely nothing like With the Old Breed, other than the fact that we were American.
Right.
Like, the similarities ended there, right?
Yeah.
It was nothing like With the Old Breed. Nothing. Other than, in my mind, okay, well, these are horrible things that are happening. It was really hard to make that connection. I'll tell you what, though, our deployment to Ramadi, the similarities between Ramadi and About Face were incredible. Not just, one of the things that hit me right out of the gate is when Hackworth gets to Vietnam and those guys are getting killed, and they're getting killed by sniper fire, indirect fire, and booby traps,
right,
which we now call IEDs for whatever reason. And that one section of the book where they've taken 100 something casualties, and they've contacted the enemy 0 times. Enemy killed 0. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. And that nightmare, it shows itself over and over and over again. And what's so hard is, and I'll tell you where it hit me again. It hit me again on Lewis Puller. When Lewis Puller is rotating between the 3 different sections, and one of them was called Riviera. Mm-hmm. And he's saying every time they go into Riviera, they take wounded or they take killed. And on top of that, they don't ever see the enemy. And I'm thinking to myself, it's maddening, right? It's maddening when you look back and you're detached, which we're detached now. And I don't know if culture's different. I don't know if our culture's different. I don't know if we value human life more. I don't know that. But when you read it, it's maddening to think about that. And you could see that, like, Hackworth, he didn't like that. He didn't like that at all. And that was I think maybe it was you that told me when I had Jim Mukayama on, or a couple people told me. They were like, you sounded giddy.
Yeah.
And I said, well, yes, I was giddy. And here I was, but it was very interesting to go and talk to Mukayama, because what was interesting to me is there's the public persona of some guy that was in the military, right? There's the public persona of some guy that was in the military, myself included, you, all of us. There's that public persona of, oh, this is what this guy's perceived as. But then there's like, okay, what about all the people that served with that person? What do they really think?
Yeah.
And what was Hackworth really like? And so going to meet Mook, I was very curious. Now, I had read an interview with him where I knew that he had he held him in the highest esteem.
Yeah, that he was a real deal.
It didn't come as a surprise to me, but still it was incredible that the perception that I had of Hackworth was accurate. It was accurate. And when you heard Mook talk about it, when he said, we called him Mr. Infantry, I was just thinking to myself, is there anything cooler in the world than to be known throughout the Army as Mr. Infantry?
Yeah.